Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight is a very interesting discussion that will focus on rethinking the workplace, redesigning the workplace, so to speak. We're going to look at innovative policies. We're also going to look at empowerment programs that empower employees and their wellness, amongst other things. During this has always been there, but this was, of course, exacerbated by the pandemic, where institutions had to take note and pay more attention about how we treat our staff, how we treat our employees. And there are two leading institutions in Rwanda that are driving forward this narrative, and I'm happy to welcome them here. One, of course, is here with us virtually, and one guest is here with us in the studio. And I'd like to start by welcoming our guest in studio, Madame Lina M. Higiro, who is the NCBA Rwanda Bank CEO. Lina, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here, and congratulations, 33. Season 4?
Yes, season 4, episode 33. I like that you paid attention to that.
Yes, I did.
Yes, season 4, episode 33. Yes. We're also joined online with us, the CEO of African Entrepreneur Collective, Madame Julienne Euler. Great to have you on The Square, Julienne.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Great, 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 great. It's the first time for both of these guests on the show. Hope it won't be the last time. My name is NMPC, host of The Square. As always, I'm joined by resident panelist Charles Haber. Charlie, always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Same here, Diana. How are you?
Good.
Good.
As we do before we kick off, we just have midweek highlights from The Square resident panelists. Unfortunately, Benna is not with us, but I'm sure she'll be following from wherever she is. Charles, any midweek highlights you'd like to share with our viewers so far?
Extremely excited about the conversations that are happening between Rwanda and Burundi. But if you look at the evolution of times over the last 12 months, the security chiefs have met, the intelligence chiefs have met, the ministers of foreign affairs have met. Now, during the course of this week, we had a highly powered delegation that came into Rwanda to meet the president. That's a very loud statement. Now, what that means for you is just to emphasize that in politics, there's no permanent friends, there's no permanent enemies, but only permanent interests. Burundi is a very key ally to us from a security, from an economic, and from a social perspective.
Yes.
Socially, over the last 6 to 12 months, we've been seeing some increase in movement across families. The hundreds of families that had fled to Rwanda, some of them had started going back, which contributed to a lull in our education, and so in our entertainment life in our market. But I think it's a step in the right direction, and hopefully, as a little bit connected to what we are discussing on the show tonight, that some of the mental stress can be relieved in Bujumbura. Yes.
We're also, thank you very much, Charles, for that. We're also just going to kick off with a couple of tweets, just to set the tone for the conversation, and also for our guests to see the expectations viewers have of them before we kick off. The first tweet is coming in from Barbara, and Barbara asks, anything around how the organizational culture has shifted, stroke any best practices to carry forward post-pandemic would be of interest to me. I am looking forward to learning from these powerful female CEOs. Thank you very much for your tweet, Barbara. We have another tweet coming in, and this tweet is from, if I'm not mistaken, from Sabena Jr. If we can have that on our screens. And he says that, I'd say that the fundamental principle that should underpin the workplace rethinking discussion ought to be the application of emotional intelligence. The impact of this leadership skill is needed now more than ever, both from a well-being and productivity perspective. Absolutely spot on, Junior, with your insightful tweets. So, yes, we're going to kick off the discussion. Again, to our guests, Julienne and Lina, great to have you on the show. My first question is to Lina, and this is to do with employee wellness or employee assistance programs. And Lina, when you kicked off this journey, it started in October of 2020, where you had an incident with an employee at NCBA Bank Rwanda that started your journey as a business leader to implement various staff empowerment programs instead of taking the usual recourse, to this situation with an employee. In doing so, you also engaged other bank CEOs as well as the Rwanda Bankers Association to highlight the importance of different employee assistance programs that focus on different things, including mental health and just general community involvement. So if you could just start by telling us more about this, how this journey started, what programs exist, and what benefits you see since you implemented a series of these different programs at your institution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the discussion.
Yes.
Discussions need to happen in different forums for us to get the fact that creating mentally healthy businesses is a business imperative. It's not a nice to have. It's not an HR thing. It is actually a business imperative. But let's go back to the story of October 2020. Something happened which was absolutely, if any of you, I think, were in that situation, would consider it a crisis. Somebody who we consider very, let's call the person Jean, to just make the story real. This Jean one day, something very, normal day, walks into one of our business units and was aggressive with one of our colleagues in public. And it was so shocking. However, when you backtrack, now I got to find out about this from one of the heads of departments who came to me and said, I think we have a challenge. But this was a month later, not even on the day of. So you can imagine as a leader, you're thinking, what is going on in this business? What don't I know? What am I not doing? And a few things came out. And as we say, crisis creates opportunity. So in this situation, there was an opportunity to know what we're actually doing right and what we need to do to improve how we are acknowledging and seeing how people are working. Are the jobs good jobs or just jobs? There's a theory, not a theory, it's actually you either have a good job or it's a job. And in that, what was interesting is the external community that we have comes into our corporates. So in the business unit where this incident happened, the business lead there actually took it in their hands, called the person back. They had an apology, just like we do in our communities, and it was closed. But this person continued behaving in ways that was worrying, and that's how it came up to us. And as you can imagine, for me, in my knowledge at that time, it was, this is an exit. There's no discussion. What are we discussing? Somebody has been violated. What? And then I had to step back because, again, on culture, somebody asked about culture. We've worked, and I've been very passionate about creating a culture where people feel psychologically safe. So we have an HR committee, as all organizations have, and the HR committee pushed back on me. No. There's something we don't know, something is happening. We are not going to go in the typical HR policy route. We're not going to do that. And they really pushed back, and this process took 2 months. Until I had to step back and say, I actually don't know what to do as a leader. And who knows? Does anyone know what to do? And when I looked out and asked a number of my colleagues, they also were dumbfounded. They didn't know, okay, so what would happen? If something worse happened, what would they do? We found that we didn't have the tools. You may have built a culture, like the positive part for us is we built a culture where, one, there was a psychological safety. The managers, the people in the HR committee who are composed of junior and senior could push back and feel confident. And they kept pushing back. So a mentally healthy organization is where you would have people who are able to do that. And also, in the business unit where the supervisor decided to take control, get the person to say what they did, even if it wasn't written, they apologized and it was done. He felt he had the autonomy to close off the situation. However, as a leader, I thought, what is this meaning to the rest of the institution? Are we allowing this behavior? Am I allowing it? And we had to that is when we started saying, we don't have the tools, and we reached out. We reached out to people like Dr. Cindy Cassidy, and just to say, what do we do? What happens? What's in Rwanda? What do we have in Rwanda that supports,
Because that was a breakup. The person just had a mental breakdown.
Had a mental breakdown.
Exactly.
This is somebody who we've known for 3 years, quiet. You wouldn't even know they exist. But this was a breakdown. And there were signs. Erratic, absenteeism without a reason, irritation. There were signs for many months. But the head of department couldn't see it, couldn't understand it, couldn't explain it. Everybody around thought, oh, the guy's just having a bad day. But then it exploded. And so that is where the journey to how do we then create, with intent, an institution that is actually mentally healthy. Not about just mental health, because people say that mental health is a personal issue. But if you're working and you're under the authority of an organization, mental health, we contribute as employers to your mental health. And as such, it's unfair to say, you deal with, you need to be resilient. What do we say? Kwihanga.
Kwihanga. Yes.
You need to be resilient, deal with it, we're all stressed. It's not fair. So that's where we stepped back and started working on certain things. How do we create a sense of purpose? And you've probably seen recently we celebrated communities. We have a men's community, a women's community. People wondered, why are you doing all that? And what happens with communities, people feel they have purpose beyond the workplace. And you also deal with situations like these in a safer place. The women tell us what's going on, the men tell us what's going on. And actually, the chairs of those two, I say, you work together, and instead of coming to the High Court, which is my office, you figure out a solution. And that's where you have autonomy, people dealing with sensitive issues in a safe place. So those are some of the things as we go along I'll be discussing. And also even people get bored. They're like, what am I doing in this job? It's boring.
Routine.
It's routine. And to take an example, so we've a receptionist, she comes in and all she does is answer calls, receive guests, answer calls, receive guests. And what we've decided to do is have a mobility program. And have an intentional culture of connection. So every new employee meets with me at least once a year, and I get to know what exactly is moving them. So, for example, we have a receptionist who was so interested in the digital business, and I said, you know what? You're going to attend the meetings in digital. And now, within a year, she's already in the digital business.
Wow.
We have a manager of legal. She actually told me, I'm bored out of my mind. And she's now handling strategy in the CFO's office, but she keeps her role.
Yes.
And that keeps people motivated and have
Absolutely.
a sense of purpose.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think this is the first time we're having this sort of conversation on the show, Charles. I know you have some comments coming through, but
I'm happy listening.
yeah, I know it's really
It's
interesting.
captivating, yes.
Yeah, to see leaders of institutions really taking a step back and saying it's not just about the bottom line. Let's look at our people. That said, I want to go to Julien. Julien is here as the CEO of the African Entrepreneur Collective. And I know that just last week, Julien, if I'm not mistaken, you announced that employees that you've had at AEC, stroke Inhomoko, I guess you'll clarify on that later on, but employees who have been working for 5 years at your institution can take a 3-month sabbatical paid. And in this 3 months, the employees are free to do whatever they want, whether it's take on a hobby, whether it's take on a course, whether it's just to rest or travel, make investments, a general reset. And I don't know other organizations in Rwanda that have take such a bold policy move. And my question to you is if you can elaborate more on how this works, as well as what inspired you to bring forward such a policy, and why do you think it's important in terms of staff productivity and just general organizational efficiency?
Yeah, thanks so much, Diana, for that question, for acknowledging the initiatives that we have at African Entrepreneur Collective, and echoing Lena, thanks so much for having this conversation. And also thanks, Lena, for what you just shared. I know that there are a number of people right now who are taking notes and able to learn from you and what you've been going through at the bank. Before I go into the sabbatical program that we have at African Entrepreneur Collective, I just want to take a step back and share a little bit more about the organization and how we really do focus on putting our people first. So African Entrepreneur Collective, we are a regional organization. We have offices in Rwanda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. In Rwanda, our local brand is Inhomoko, and we support micro, small, and medium enterprises to grow their businesses through business advisory and investments. But at the core of what we do, we are in the business of people development. Whether you're an entrepreneur or one of our staff, we are in the business of supporting and investing in people. And I bring that up because it roots us in the work that we do, sort of stripping aside the products and services, but at the core of what we are is we're in the business of people. Now, what does that mean for us? It means that, when we have a mindset of supporting and investing in people, we actually can put together initiatives that are in line with our bottom line. And when you build an environment at your company or organization that sees people development as the core, then everything else comes in line. So, when you're able to offer staff a safe and secure place, when you empower and develop colleagues, when you make sure that people are happy and fulfilled, this directly relates to customer experience. And when staff are happier, they provide better products and services to our clients. And so, wanting to start the conversation a little bit by framing that it's not in addition to the bottom line of staff development and supporting staff and staff welfare, it actually contributes to the bottom line. And we have found that our organization has grown so much, our productivity has increased, we've been able to expand because of this focus. So that's the frame for which we look at initiatives like the sabbatical program that we just launched. Like what Lena was talking about, the importance of culture. Culture and our values sort of root us in all of the work that we do. And one of the things that is able to develop our culture is something that we do twice a year, which we call a happiness audit. And the senior leadership team, including myself, we interview every staff throughout the entire organization twice a year and ask them how they're feeling about their positions, the organization, and what is something that we can do to make them happier. And this process actually is something that crowdsourced a lot of the ideas that we have in order to make AEC and Inhomoco a better place to work. So our sabbatical program was actually something that came out of some suggestions from our colleagues, people who have given a lot of time and energy into the organization are wanting an opportunity to take a break, to go out and learn new skills. And this is something that I am so excited about this. It's going to be great for the employees that take advantage of this process and this initiative. But as a leader, I am so excited to see the new ideas, the new energy, and ways that our organization can improve because of what people bring back to work after they take this time off.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Julianne. And the next question I'd like to get in is just looking at, the future of work based on the COVID-19 pandemic, a major disruptor. Also, millennials, the more that people hire millennials, this sort of rigid 9-to-5 work hours are no longer that, relevant. It's more about productivity than showing up at the office. This is some of the questions I want us to deal with later on as we go on in the show. But now I'll just hand over to Charles to share his thoughts. Yes.
I think one of the best things that have happened to our lives is COVID.
Silver lining, as they say, silver lining.
Yeah, because it's been a huge wake-up call for a lot of us, irrespective of where you lie. Simple things as taking your salary for granted and not taking an advantage of an opportunity of that side hustle that can bring you an extra income. And I'm glad that we're with Lena in here. That pre-COVID, it was not unheard of for the banks to disburse loans and not take a particular interest on how the borrower is doing and just wait for your monthly repayment. It was not unheard of for landlords, and I'll say this as somebody who is a very active player in that space on behalf of landlords, and I say now, not to take particular interest on how the tenant's business is doing and just wait for your rent at the end of the month. And when the tenant comes complaining to you that, you know, business is not doing well because there's too much competition or because of Morenje or police or other external factors, you know, rain and whatever it is, or taxes or whatever it is, and you say, I don't care, I just want my rent. Or staff at work, and this is, it's very easy. It's not the best example that we have NCBA in here, because they're representative of institutions that can afford to pay their staff
regardless.
Year in, year out, regardless of how businesses are doing. Blue Oceans, you'd struggle so much. Century would struggle so much, and so on. But you now imagine a small business like somebody who is making mandazi on the streets. You know, how are they going to survive by saying, by going by Julian's example of sending people away on the beach to have a good time, so that they can reduce their mental stress. So I think sometimes it's extremely important to put things in context. I am sure that Julian is going to come up with saying that there's no one size fits all in terms of managing different sizes of businesses. But the point I'm trying to raise is that irrespective of the size of your business or the size of your organization, COVID also taught us business leaders and us and whoever, whatever level of leadership you are, to give more value to your team, which in the past, for very many business leaders or leaders of different institutions, you really cared about productivity ahead of that particular person. So the silver lining in there has been really a huge wake-up call across the different divides, irrespective of where you lie. So I think that's one thing by far that has been a huge wake-up call, and my prayer is that the likes of and I'll using Homoko because that's the entity that I'm more accustomed with Julian and her crew and NCBA, just give them props for the amazing work they've done in terms of taking this forward. Second point I wanted to raise is really around in terms of valuing what we have. I've said the staff, which is really about people, but also opportunities. You know, we've sung the song around domestic tourism, and the silver lining. Who would ever have known that would have had an opportunity to keep alive. But also things around, just to preempt the last question you asked around the future of work, around internet. You know, the school where my daughters go to, quite a number of teachers tested positive when the schools were supposed to begin this week. School term was postponed to next week, and they told us the whole of this week we would be studying online, the kids would be studying online. It wasn't a shocker because the whole of 2020 was studying online. Yeah. So such things really have been a huge wake-up call. Is it necessarily a good thing that that atmosphere at home is the same atmosphere you're using to learn? You know, isn't it contributing a bit to, or significantly to a child's or a parent's mental depression? Most likely, yes. So it's quite an interesting, it's very interesting times in which we live.
Yeah. I would like to read some tweets from Berna. Berna is a panelist, resident panelist who's usually on the show. I think you know that. And just in light of the fact that she's not here, I think these are her contributions to the show as we go forth.
Probably didn't want to have too many women on the show.
So her first tweet is, I'm thrilled to hear our guests are putting people first, in brackets, before the bottom line, and tackling mental health issues and employee welfare. It is truly commendable. Corporate leadership must be aligned with humanity and be a force for the well-being of people. This is her first tweet. Her second tweet coming in, she states that said, shareholders will always track key ratios, including returns on investment. I'm curious to know if NCBA and AAC are already experiencing significant growth linked to enhanced staff motivation. How can they track progress, and what will success look like in the long term? And her third question, and Lena and Julian, I hope you've taken note of Brenna's submissions. Her third tweet is, most people who express mental health problems lose their jobs before they get the help they need. We need mental health policies that give flexibility to anyone experiencing a mental health problem to return to work and be treated fairly. So thank you very much, Brenna. I know if she was seated with us, that's exactly what she'd be saying right now. And my question to you, Lena, and then over to Julian later on is with regards to, I wanted to talk about issues to do with the working hours, the flexibility, mothers who nurse, between going back to work and there's a newborn children, different elements such as COVID-19. A lot of parents are online with their children learning. At the same time, they have to be at the office. These are the flexibility in terms of hours I'm talking about. What is your approach to this as an institutional leader? And I'll start with you, Lena, before I go to Julian.
All right. I think if I got it right, Bana was asking about growth, in terms of growth and motivation.
Yes.
As a business, we do look at our top line.
Yes.
And it's been very interesting. Our staff, our teams, in the region, we do an engagement survey. The Rwanda team is the most highly engaged team, and I'm glad to say that because of, as somebody said, emotional intelligence. We have a culture of connection. And that connection has helped us with our emotional intelligence on how to work with each other.
So you can see the actual progress.
We can actually see the progress. I mean, we've grown 300% since I joined.
Okay.
That's about almost 100% every year.
Every year.
And that is not, it's not, businesses are human communities. And that business has been grown by people who are motivated and excited to be where they are. And that's because people feel cared for. And it's simple things, like knowing that you're heard. That's something it doesn't have a value. But if I am in trouble, can I talk? Will somebody listen to me? Do I have options? And such things drive your business. We do stress tests. I learned that actually from the event of 2020, that you need to do a stress test. People do stress tests for machines, and they don't do stress tests for organizations.
Yes.
So we did a stress test through with Cindy Cassidy and Laura from the IAGA team, and we were quite. It was interesting. There was a clear gender difference. Men were quite happy. The women were stressed. But the women had higher stress levels. And when we dug deeper, there were many things that I hadn't even, me as a leader, didn't see. One, you come to work and you're expecting, and there's nowhere to even just put your feet up. It sounds simple, but people are motivated. They're smiling at 6 p.m. A lady is she's pulling off a CPU and putting her feet there. And that's what motivated me to put up it's like a mother's room where you can just take a break and also breastfeed. I realized, where do you breastfeed? In the loo? I mean, really practically, you're actually going to the loo to breastfeed, or you get a fever by the end of the day because there's nowhere to breastfeed. And these are not expensive. You need a small space. And these are some of the things that come out of stress testing. We need to stress test our organizations. Yeah, so those are some of the things I would contribute to this. So the top line will grow. You'll see it. Yeah. Because people are excited. Yeah.
I'll just ask Julian the same question before I come back to the other question to do with flexibility hours and that sort of thing, and advisory. Yeah. Julian, to Brenna's pertinent question, are you seeing, well, I know this just started last week, the sabbaticals, but you have other programs or other policies to really enhance employee wellness. Do you see a sort of a pattern between those programs and growth of the organizations?
Absolutely. We, starting in 2020 and even before, we have been growing at about 50% per year. And just last year, we were actually able to grow our staff by 60%. We have another 50% growth projected for the next year. not just in terms of our staff, but also in terms of our revenues and clients. And so we have seen absolute growth in our organization because we have provided a safe space for people within the organization to do the best jobs that they can. And that's something that we really think about all the time, and that I feel tremendous responsibility as a leader is to create the best environment and to foster the best environment for people to be at their best. And that requires a lot of flexibility, that requires a lot of creativity. But I want to say that most of the best ideas that we have is actually from my colleagues themselves. And to provide a place in the organization for people to be able to share solutions for what they think are their, what problems they experience, whether we need to have different working hours for people who are juggling responsibilities at home, whether we need to have certain other support systems within our employee benefits, to really continue to ask, how can we make this a better place to work? And sort of to Charles' earlier point, right, depending on the size of the business, you might not have the budget to be able to offer a lot of services, but any size organization with intention can make their company better. And part of it is just setting out that intention. Another part of it is what Lena referenced, is creating an open environment for people to be able to share ideas, to share what they need. But that doesn't mean that you have to do it all. What it means is that you need to listen and to consider, and then to continuously check in about if this is something that we're able to offer now or in the future. The very first things that we did at Enhomoco as a small organization of 10 people were very, very low cost. But it was about building a culture of togetherness, building a culture where we can solicit and receive open and accurate feedback, where we can take employees at their word for what we need, and then be very sort of compassionate to try to solve those problems with them. And that's where I think some of the great organizations really set themselves apart from the rest, is when they focus on employees. And my prediction going forward is that it's going to be organizations that have a great place to work, where employees feel empowered and supportive regardless of the environment. And that's changing all the time. But if you can make that commitment to continuing to iterate and improve alongside your workforce, then you are going to see tremendous payoffs. And that is an investment that I would make over and over and over again, and continue to do.
Mm-hmm. I really, Gillian, I really especially like what you talked about, being intentional. So no matter the size, the type of organization, it can be a government institution, it could be an NGO, it could be a private sector, enterprise like Lena's. But it's intentionality to make your returns on investment linked to the human capital, to the human aspect of the organization. So I really like what you said about intentionality. And I would like to go back to Lena just before I go to Charles. And I really want to talk about the question, just to hear it from your perspective. The flexible hours, mostly because the banking sector is quite rigid. It's high stress, very high stress environment. You have to make decisions quickly. You're front facing, you're dealing with clients on a daily basis. So I think the pressure is a bit more. So how do you align that, we're in 2022, we're in the midst of a pandemic, people have stress from different areas, different corners every day. How do you align the usual 9 to 5 sort of work environment? How do you deal with especially young people that you're bringing on board, millennials who have a high, they respond better to more flexible working hours when it comes to, just productivity. And what are some of the, programs that you've put in place to sort of deal with this, this element, this aspect?
Element of flexi.
Yeah.
So flexi time and flexi anything, it comes to our boundaries. I think we all saw that Portugal, it's like it's banned. You cannot send emails or anything past work hours or weekends.
It's actually illegal.
It's illegal.
Yeah.
It's actually illegal.
Yeah.
And these are some of the things, simple things that we're trying to do at the bank is try not to send emails after 8 and on weekends unless it's an emergency. But you talked about flexi time, and it's something we're trying to work on now, because you've got operational staff who really are stuck at their desk for many hours, and it becomes very difficult to know how do we then work on flexi time. But we're working on something I call My Friday, where any staff can request 4 hours in a week where they just do their thing without having to explain what they're doing, just get away from the office. So we're working on something like that. We've introduced no Fridays, no meetings on Fridays, so that people can actually have focused time, and it's their choice whether they come into work or not. There are things which can work in certain sectors, and we're trying to work with that. But it's a challenge, and as you said, the young people. So what we do have, you can play music. It sounds funny, but
no, actually, you take that for granted in offices where there's music, you know.
They have their Bluetooth speakers.
Yes,
in the
we have
banking hall.
Friday. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
So you can come to our banking hall in Kigali Heights and you listen to music while you're being served. And for some reason, that brightens the mood of everybody. But having that flexibility to be able to enjoy yourself has helped. But flexi time is really a discussion. We can't expect people who've been away for 2 years working from home to suddenly come and work, even non-millennials, 9 to 5. So it's something that we have to work on and be sensitive about as we go along our businesses. And there's also a lot of pressure now. Young men and women are now doing double jobs when they get home. Kids, people are starting to there's tutoring, there's online, there's so much as you with young kids are having to deal with. So we have to remember that. And I don't have an issue with people coming in late, leaving late. Even if it's not a policy, it's a known fact in the bank. If you come in and you do what you need to do and leave. And that has created a lot of autonomy. People feel, I'm not being pushed, but I deliver. So that's the approach we're taking. It's not written on paper, but it's a journey.
Yeah,
And
it is a journey. Absolutely. Charles?
But I want to say something to Charles.
Yes.
That you said that our salaries will just come anyway.
I hope you appreciate that was a hyperbole.
I want to say that
Yes.
banks, like other businesses, suffered during COVID. There are banks that had to let go 50% of their staff. In Rwanda and for NCBA, we made a choice not to. And instead, what we did is we cut back on other benefits. And that was the choices we made, just to get that out of the...
I'm sure, Lina, you appreciate that was hyperbole. And also it was in comparison to other businesses. And that's why I gave an example of a listed company and a Mandazi business. Okay. Yes. But I want to say two things. One, I'll speak about myself. And this is really around the point around what is it that cannot wait? And we all have this thing that each time you receive a message, you have to respond to it, or you can, or somebody will deem it a bit offensive that you saw their message and you could not. About 6 months or so ago, just approaching 1 year, I made a deliberate decision to say, as soon as I get onto my wheel, I switch off my data.
Okay.
Because the temptation to text while driving was just so real. Wow. And each time, and all my friends with no exception, when I get to my destination, they say, we sent you a message, why didn't you respond? Or they ask you, why aren't you online? Tell them I was driving. I'm like, is that a reason? See, and you actually realize, like 11 out of 10 times, it's not that urgent. It can wait. So, and you realize that if you're trying to overtake a car or you're about to run the traffic light, so it's on orange and you have those seconds you're thinking about, and you get onto your phone and you realize that's the time you're actually going to hit a Sophia. So I think that the whole thought process of what is it that cannot wait, it has to get into all of us. And I like Lina's example around emails that cannot be sent beyond a certain time. Just before we broke off into the new year, one of our clients had given us a very tight deadline to meet in terms of signing on a big client for one of the projects. We did find a very good lead on the 23rd of December, shared the emails, and there was no response until on Tuesday this week. So, and on Tuesday, which was yesterday, we started getting all these very aggressive messages. How far? Can we close this week? And we're telling them, hello, we sent this 2 weeks ago and there was no response, and now you want us to close this in 3 days. And we got a very polite response. Dear Mr. Haber, please be advised that the organization was on holiday.
As it should be.
As it should be.
Yes.
I'm sure when we meet again, they'll ask me, why weren't you on holiday?
Yeah.
And I should have been on holiday.
Yeah.
So I think it's could it have waited? Definitely it could have waited. Did the deal catch fire, or did it go anywhere else? No, it did not. So it can wait. I'm sure that's the point, and that we all need to understand as business leaders, as employees, and everyone across the chain. The second thing, I want to talk about is Bana talked about something extremely important about the aspect of enforcement. And in this country, we are very lucky that Rwanda is a country of people that listen. We are very obedient people. And I would like to implore whether it is at the level of Bankers Association or public service, or the areas where there's regulation and a bit of enforcement, whether it's at RURA that has so many institutions under it, government and the other bigger employers, that if there can be an aspect of the organizational culture that Julien was talking about, that these big employers are the ones who are most likely to be very adversely affected if there is a problem within the institutions. So if there can be an aspect of force, like the way they say it didn't happen anymore because of COVID, where they used to say you work up to 3 p.m. in public services and you go for compulsory sports, and to encourage that, organizations would pay subscription or membership to gyms and sports facilities and what have you to keep a healthy workforce. So if there can be an element of force, it's almost compulsory. To
do what exactly? To sign up for these programs?
Yes, to sign up for these programs.
Yes.
To allow people to go and rest.
Yes.
To allow people to go into those breakaway groups, the example she was giving us of the fathers' clubs, the mothers' clubs, and what.
Like an element of,
yes,
not force, but somehow that thin line, that balance between.
To go and do that other activity
for your benefit.
That is not necessarily work-related.
But for your benefit.
It's not a time to go to the bar, it's not a time to go and go by, your side hustle and what have you.
No, but I hear you, it's for the benefit of the...
Be very, very deliberate about it, and I think we will be able to reap benefits down the line.
I want to talk about just the few minutes that we have left, and I'll address this question to Julien and you, Lena, but as briefly as possible. My particular sort of submission or my intervention in this discussion is organizations, especially big employers, that really have this culture of not respecting employees who request for their annual leave days or whatever leave days during the year. You have, and it's almost a cultural thing, especially mostly in government or parastatals, where you ask for this particular leave days and you're told, no, something important is coming up, wait for next month, and before you know it, it's even over a year. And what you do is, you have accumulated leave days, or it's paid for. So my question to you is, as business leaders, sort of changing this mindset or changing this narrative, what do you have to say to that? Because what happens inadvertently is, you have employees who are just completely unmotivated, have total burnout, and this affects overall the work of the institution. So when it comes to respecting time off for staff, what is your advice? What advice would you give these big employers? And Julien, I'll address the first question to you and then over to Lena.
Yeah, that's a really important question, Diana. Thank you for that. I would say a couple of things. One, burnout is so real, and it's so important for us to provide an opportunity for our colleagues to take the time that they need. And oftentimes as leaders, we think about, well, what is the cost of coverage? We've got staff who are all running at full capacity. They're burnt out themselves, and when someone asks for leave, we think to ourselves, ugh, what is it going to cost for us to overcome this person's absence? How are we going to fill in for them? And what I like to do is think about just flipping the frame. What is the cost for us if we have an employee who is burnt out, who's not performing at their best? That's when mistakes are made. What is the opportunity for us when we offer leave and we encourage people to take their leave, for us to do better long-term succession planning? How do we use these times of absence where other employees can take over as interim roles, even if it's just for a short period? Very practically, when people take leave, it's also an opportunity for us to evaluate if there are, in the unlikely event of fraud or of things that aren't going wrong, to be able to uncover that. So if we think about the benefits of someone being absent for a short amount of time, those sincerely and incredibly outweigh the costs. But I also have to say, it's very important that people watch the leaders. And if you are the leader of an organization and you don't take time to rest and recover, if you're always in the office but you say, oh, don't worry, it's okay for you to go, then we're sending mixed messages. So to the extent that we can think about that and reflect on us as leaders and managers, how do we take time, is also a signal that's really important. So the benefit of annual leave, for instance, is you have the benefit of long-term planning in many cases, and to think about that in terms of the benefits, development of other colleagues, trying to figure out succession planning. Of course, things come up, deadlines come up that we can't take, but that should be the exception and not the rule.
Absolutely, exception and not the rule. Lena, over to you.
Yes.
Do you deal with this at NCBA?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
We even had a crisis with that.
Yes.
So, I mean, what you find is, as a young business, we're about 3 years as NCBA in Rwanda, going to 4, and we started out with one person doing almost 4 jobs, which was very unhealthy. People actually couldn't go on leave. As we grew and started having more people supporting, people are taking leave. And as Juliana said, it's really true. People watch leaders. If your leader is not going on leave, people will fear to even ask for one day. But there's also a deeper thing to ask. When somebody is not letting you go on leave and a department is having people not going on leave, there's something wrong. There's an inefficiency somewhere, because it's not possible that everybody should work 24 hours and not take leave. And then what you create is presenteeism. People are there, but they're actually not there. And it costs more to the organizations than absenteeism. So I would encourage that people look into the issue. What's really happening? Is it the attitude of the head of department? And if it's the head of department, it's your problem then as a leader. There's something that's not working there. So yes, it's a problem, but there's many things we can now do to encourage leave, paid leave, get 10 days as a block and you pay for it. And that's happening in many organizations.
Exactly.
And it's encouraging. But yes, people watch the leader, and as people say, we're like in a fishbowl. It's an embarrassing thing to say, but as leaders, we are actually in a fishbowl, and people are watching everything you do. But it is something we have to really enforce.
We've come to the end of the show. Unfortunately, this is really my least favorite part of the discussion, but we still do have time for very few closing remarks, and I would like us to just go over to Julian and then you, Lena, and Charles, if time allows, over to you. But priorities are guests. But closing remarks on advisory you have for big corporations, big employers, basically companies that have the capacity and should have the intentionality to put forward what you both are doing in your organizations to improve the human aspects of these institutions. Advisory on the way forward, especially looking at the fact that the future of work is changing rapidly, more so, of course, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So over to you, Julian.
Thanks for that. Very practically, I would say to leaders is ask yourself the first question of, well, what happens if you don't change? What's the cost of doing things the way you've always done? Now seeing that there are organizations out there that are offering offering opportunities for employee engagement, employee benefits. I think we should all be encouraged to continue to push the boundaries for offering better places to work, because that's when we all gain. How are we able to be more equitable in our policies and encouraging safe places for people to be their best? Now, that's easier said than done, but I go back to what I said before of having that intentionality at first, to ask people to survey your colleagues, to be genuine and open about this type of new development, because that's really when people are gonna step up and shine. And I think we all need to hear that it's okay to go slowly. It's okay to add, one new initiative at a time, to build with habit, and that's where we're gonna see tremendous results. But thank you so much again for having me on for this discussion. We have so many policies and initiatives at InHomoCo and at AEC that we would love to share. If anyone is interested more in the details, please feel free to email us at hr@inhomoco.com. We have a great team who are always willing to share what we do, to encourage others and to offer a roadmap if helpful.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Julienne. And please, I'm very sure I'd like to encourage InHomoCo or AEC to just get on our Twitter feed, on all our socials, to just continue the conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lena, over to you.
Yes, thank you, and thank
Closing
you so
remarks.
much. This has been interesting, first
Yes.
time on TV. So in closing, really, like I said before, as leaders, wherever you are, we should be in the business of creating good jobs. And there was a survey done, what is a good job? A good job has 4 aspects. 1, where a staff feels psychologically safe. 2, where they see a future. 3, where there's a sense of purpose, and 4, where they feel fairly treated. So ask yourself genuinely, as a leader, wherever you are, or a supervisor, how does it really feel to work as your employee? Really, how does it feel? And start slowly, and it's a culture change, and it's a journey. Start slowly with things that are affordable, and start opening the discussion.
Yeah.
When leaders talk, people listen. And when people listen, it trickles down. And that's what we need to start doing. And thank you so much for this. And thank you, Julianne.
Thank you very much, Lena. Charles, very briefly.
Yeah,
Miraculously, we have less than a minute. Yeah.
No, I've been learning a lot, and I'll probably reach out to Julienne after the show.
Yes.
But just in closing remarks, I think the biggest dilemma we'll have as leaders is to manage competition versus productivity, whereas the expectation is that you're supposed to remain either a leader a leader in whatever business space that you have. So how you're able to juggle that, I think, is going to be a huge dilemma for all of us.
It's a fine balance.
Very fine balance, but very eye-opening discussion for me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Charlie. Always a pleasure hosting
Same
with
here,
you.
Diana. Yeah.
Lena, it's been an honor having you on the show. I really hope it won't be the last time, like I said earlier on. Also to Julian, on behalf of AC, it's been an honor having you on the show. Very important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. To our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. Keep the conversation going on the Square, using #TheSquareRW. Thank you very much for your tweets. Have a good night. We'll see you again next week. Thank you.